But these guys are punctual.
Here we are, January 2011. I'm almost getting used to saying that. It was hard for me when Y2K came along, but now that we're 11 years into the new century, I'm almost comfortable with it. Plattsburgh and North Country Chamber of Commerce, Shelley Powers, how are you? Terry Miron, how are you?
Good, Gordy.
Our friend John Kruger, how are you doing? We're here for a good purpose, and apparently it's after breakfast because I didn't see any coffee and donuts on the table when I walked in. So maybe we've got a more serious topic to talk about. Shelley, we have new things to learn, like history corridor and Adirondack Coast.
Right.
I may never get used to Adirondack Coast. Kind of has a ring to it, doesn't it?
I think it's a fantastic descriptive term for this area. So it just sums it all up. It's very visual, and that's what we want to portray.
You've got a very prestigious committee here. John says, what am I doing here? I've only had 2 meetings. Don't ask me any hard questions. So what is this committee all about, Shelley?
Yeah. We, the county, Clinton County, passed an occupancy tax about 2.5 years ago. And with that came the implementation of the Strategic Tourism Planning Committee. And it's a 9-person committee, and there's also 3 liaisons on it from local municipalities, and it's to help with the marketing initiatives by the Adirondack Coast Visitors Bureau.
It's so important to do that.
Yeah.
It's something that we all have a kind of a vested interest in this. Calvin
Absolutely.
Behind the camera back there, and it's something we've been crowing about on Hometown Cable ever since I started with Calvin, and it dates back with me to the 4th of July 1961 when I uttered my first words on the radio in Plattsburgh.
Wow.
You have so much here.
Right.
Why aren't you talking a lot more loudly about what you have here?
Well, I think it's funny. A lot of what we do is done outside of the area, so people don't know that we're doing it, one. And that's always been a challenge, too, is there is a visitors bureau, and we're doing a lot of marketing outside of the area, and people don't see it, so they don't know. They're not familiar with it.
But you know, they do read the paper, they do watch television, they see Hometown Cable, and we all do our best to spread the word.
Right.
And we are, thank God, we're seeing the results. You and I have talked often about
Right.
this wonderful international airport that
Right.
we have here, and its progress over the last couple of years is beyond my wildest dreams, and I have pretty wild dreams. So what's this committee all about?
The committee's really, its function started to help with the marketing efforts for the Visitors Bureau, like I said. But what really transpired in the last year was really something remarkable. Sitting and talking with the committee members. Terry's been on the committee since the beginning. John just joined us in the last month. And he's already been to quite a few meetings. But really to figure out who we are as a destination and, what our strengths, what our weaknesses were, and the opportunities. And from that, this really big plan came up, the Destination Master Plan, and it's something that's really going to serve as the framework for the committee going forward and to help us grow as a community and as a destination. It's really exciting.
Gordy,
Terry, you've been here for a long, long time. And I know, short of standing out on the Northway in a skirt waving people to stop here and come to my place,
Will you do that?
That's quite an image.
you've had a vested interest. You and I have talked about this 100 times when you came up with your original scheme. And I know you've thought about it forever and ever and ever. And I can remember when the Northway was built, we were saying, how can we get those Canadian people to stop here? They just go by at 65 miles an hour. So this is important for you.
Gordy, you said, speaking of having wild ideas, this is a wild idea. And I think it's really, the most important starting point that this community's ever had. The Destination Master Plan's basic concept is to take every asset this community has and develop it to its maximum potential. So it's talking about taking Plattsburgh and putting Plattsburgh, for example, as what is dear to John's heart, taking the history part and actually claiming our place in history and creating a physical product here from a tourism standpoint that will put Plattsburgh on the map to draw people to come to this area. And we're talking about, one of the big things that came out of that destination master plan was a interpretive center. And the interpretive center we're still in the initial planning phases, but the interpretive center might very well have as a central component the Battle of Plattsburgh and Battle of Alcor. And part of the dream and the plan that's coming out of this is that we would actually rebuild the Battle of Plattsburgh fleet on a pond,
You get me so excited.
on a site that's large enough to handle it, which, let's say for now...
How about right behind Comfort Inn?
Well, no, let's say for now it's the beach site, because it is one of the largest sites
Sure.
that could be obtained financially without, I think, a problem. And you would have a pond, you'd have this rebuilt fleet, you'd have an interpretive center, and you would also build some retail that would surround that pond, that would make it, a very attractive venue to go to. There might be some restaurants and cafes, and you might tie into the beach for further development. And this recreated fleet would be something that people could actually walk out of the interpretive center, go through a boardwalk effect to connect from ship to ship, and get the story of the Battle of Plattsburgh. And the Battle of Alcor would be involved in that. But to do something that takes those two very historic battles, that really we deserve. The Battle of Alcor is displayed in the Smithsonian in Washington, as you know, and take those two very historic battles and say, we're going to create something that is competitive regionally and nationally to draw people here. And the buildings could be vintage buildings. There could be trees with all the lights on, and you can envision yourself having a coffee or a lunch or a dinner in a venue that surrounds all that. And I think that you're starting to get to a level that people will come to see those things.
It takes a while to get the people of this North Country excited or even interested in some of these concepts, because they've been so busy scratching out a living over their lifetimes that they have a very narrow perspective. And as you were talking, Terry, you know what I was thinking of? How big is the Plymouth Rock? It's about this big. I planned a long time to take my family up there. It's a wonderful spot, and they built things around that Plymouth Rock, and for very good reason. But we have, as is obvious in all the wonderful publicity Shelley and other people have done through this chamber over the years, we have everything up here. We have natural beauty. We have unbelievable history. And even John, who is a relative newcomer to this immediate area, immediately became immersed in its history.
And I'm largely on this committee as a product of affirmative action. No, it's true. Is it not true?
It is true.
I love it.
One of the goals in our destination master plan was to add a voice of history to the strategic tourism planning committee. So
And what a voice it
and
is.
yes, we've got a great one.
Well, those of our viewers who've seen the myriad interviews we've done with John Kruger over the years know that he is a great student of history and a scholar. He's got a long, long tenure in teaching and talking about history.
Okay, enough about me. The important thing, because I can't be here for the whole program, one of the initial strong benefits, I think, of this committee is that you had business and community leaders who came together, did a lot of brainstorming, and came to the conclusion, sort of a place that you and I and Calvin had already reached, that one of the things that makes this area special is its history. And as your viewers know, there are a lot of small, struggling museums and galleries all through the Champlain Valley. And a lot of us are wondering, how we're going to keep the door open, how we're going to keep the lights on, how we're going to continue to do the things that we do. Well, now we have the support of the business community. Now we have even more support from the chamber. And if we can get increased community buy-in, and people can pick different spots for the master plan where they can play a role, where their organization can get involved, where they can make this a better place, we're all going to benefit.
You know, we've talked about this often. My feeling toward preserving this history and projecting it to the rest of the world goes back to my very beginnings here in the North Country when I was a student of history, even in high school in the early 1950s. And when I came here and I said, on the radio, every single day, you people are not doing enough to promote what you have to the rest of the world. Who knows about the Battle of Plattsburgh in Oshkosh, Wisconsin? Right?
Right.
Even down in New Orleans, where they mention it briefly in their tours, you know, it's still underplayed. And we've talked about that for years. Calvin and I have talked about it ad nauseum on and off the camera. But back during 1964, when we celebrated the sesquicentennial, we had some events, including the Brothers of the Brush and Long Beards, that focused on the history of this area. Fast forward to the time when we had, talk about a dream come true, Terry, a campus of 3 museums on the former Plattsburgh Air Force Base. The mere act of trying to save the base. You know, in the early to mid 90s, kind of wrote a paragraph about our quality of life. And doesn't this make you, it's a feel-good thing for me. I mean,
me too.
I'm way too old to get this excited, but I don't care. If it's my last breath, I'll be promoting this area for what we have. Not the least of which are the wonderful people, and you've got a lot of them right on your committee, Shelley.
I have an absolutely tremendous committee, and I have to, when they first told me I'd be working with a committee, you know, I had some hesitation. Whenever you add more people to the mix, sometimes it's tough, but I think, and you know, the Destination Master Plan is representative of this, is we have some visionaries and we have people who are really committed to this community, and I think that's the key. And what was wonderful to be a part of was one of our initial meetings was going around the room and asking everybody to, you know, what are the results you want to see come out of the Destination Master Plan? And it was echoed again and again was pride in the community. People want to stay here, they want their kids to stay here, and they really want to build that community pride. And this plan will help us do that.
Gordy, you know, one of the really important things, if you can help get the word out, is for this to be successful, we're really looking for it to be a broad-based community event. For almost everybody in the community to accept the challenge to make Plattsburgh the best place it can be. And not have those be empty words. I mean, we're talking about the outdoor activities, developing the infrastructure, so kayaking and paddling and all this other boating that we have these wonderful natural resources can be maximized and draw people, have the community enjoy it and have the people come from other areas to enjoy it, who then go to museums like the Kent DeLorme Museum because they're here looking for things to do. And then, so we need a lot of people that have that would like to be volunteers that will come in and help us in the pursuit of this, of the community, hopefully a community more than any other community in this state, or maybe even country, coming together to say, we're going to develop ourselves to be the best this community can be.
For our collective advantage. We focused on this for years. You know, we've built a framework. Where the foundation is built, we're on the cusp of an historical time. And in 2012 and 2014, that just gets my crank going. And I know it's the same for all of you. So why not tell people about it? The Battle of Plattsburgh is built up to this. What we want to do, if I'm interpreting what you say correctly, Terry, is create in every individual man, woman, child, grandparents, uncles and aunts, an ownership in this area. to the point where they realize it's to their benefit. And we talk in politics these days about what's going to happen to our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. This is our shot at it. John, the history of the next few years is going to, you're going to see fireworks when you're sleeping.
See, Terry's clearly the visionary, and I'm the history guy, and we're trying to do a mind meld here. But not only have we got Valcour and Plattsburgh, we're right on the eve of the 150th anniversary of the Civil War. We're right up against the centennial of the First World War. I mean, this area played important roles in those conflicts as well.
Absolutely.
And we're not limiting just to
Right.
the military.
Right.
I mean, we're envisioning reenactments of all different kinds, of all different periods, of costume storytellers in the various hotels and motels and restaurants, of historic pathways.
And we are the perfect size area to pull this off. You know what I mean?
Because it's big enough that there's a critical mass, but
Right.
it's small enough that people know their friends and neighbors.
But that's a tough nut to crack. And it's beginning to crack open like the birth of a baby chick. For many years, I'm older than almost everybody combined in this room.
Well,
No.
But when I first came here, I said to somebody, what has Plattsburgh got? My first answer, the Kent Delord House. Only history that most people knew about, and 80% of the population had never been there. But thanks to a guy by the name of L. Newton Hayes way back when, he indoctrinated me very quickly, and then my interest began to spiderweb. But we do have the best of a million worlds. I mean, Shelley's been preaching that for a long time, but so have you all. I mean, your whole life and future is invested in this area, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of pride in coming from this area, and I would like to see this area become, I mean, it's a hackneyed phrase, but all it's capable of being, but it has to be given meaning by every person being willing to contribute time, money, ideas. I mean, we're looking for people to tell us what they think can make this place a better place to
Right.
be. So everybody out there, if we could raise that level of consciousness that this community is at a point where it's looking to do everything it can to improve itself.
It has to be mass infusion. And it has to, John, I know you realize this being a scholar, it has to start with the little teeny kids around the kitchen table and in school, drawing pictures like that wonderful mural that we have on the county building downtown.
or the poster contest for the Battle of Plattsburgh.
Absolutely.
Right.
But that's what it takes. As Terry says, as Shelley says, on every level, getting people thinking about it and talking about it.
And I think that's, we look at it because, again, we're charged with the tourism for Clinton County, but it goes back to the community. And, we're engineering this in such a way in the development of the, of Clinton County as a destination, but it's really going to affect the quality of life of every person who lives in this county. And so we're going to do it responsibly. We're going to be good stewards of the environment. And we want to make sure, again, because we're all residents of Clinton County as well, so we want to make sure that what we do does not disrupt but enhance the quality of life here. And I think that's a big key to
I
this.
can remember standing on the steps of the old stone barracks that has been very much in the news lately, and the letters to the editor and speak out, etc. And having some local and state politicians looking out over the Lake Champlain and saying, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could get a replica of the Saratoga, anchored right out there. And it seemed like such a far-fetched idea. Now, with what you people have talked about, it's within the realm of possibility.
There are a lot of steps that have to
Right.
take place, but it's in the outer limits of possibility.
It's a vision, and we're in, and we need to be very clear that we're in the very early stages of this entire process. So we rolled out a plan, and now we're welcoming more people into the conversation. We've done a lot of outreach already. but asking people to come in, get involved, and some of our goals may shift a little bit. Some may get loftier, some may get a little smaller in the short term. This is still evolving, and I think Terry always talks about brainstorming and getting others' inputs, and I think that's what's going to be such a key component of this. Is this is going to be owned by everybody.
And ultimately, it'll be absolutely essential to get the national spotlight swinging toward this little piece of northeastern New York.
We're thinking international.
Yeah.
Yeah, but of course you
Right.
are.
We have a couple of visionaries
Yes.
here.
But absolutely,
Right.
it's to get that international spotlight swinging over here.
Right.
And believe me, it's a creaking monster, and it's very hard, because there are high-profile destinations, so to speak.
There are, but I think, again, making this process very transparent, and again, being the marketer, I'm always looking at the PR opportunities, and even us just starting this process and getting the word out on that's going to start the momentum and people paying attention. We will be included in news articles, from the get-go. And then, as we grow, so I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I don't think that's going to be a big task to.
I wonder, go ahead, Terry, your mouth
Well,
was open.
Some of the things that were, part of our conversation early on was to dream big, wild ideas. And so that's what we did. And it may have to be phased because as we grow the tourism base, more things become possible.
Right.
Because the more tourists you hear, the more money spent in the community, the more you can grow. It's not any different on a much, much smaller scale, but to envision like what happened in Orlando with Disney World. What happened to that over the years? I'm not saying we're going to become another
No.
Disney World. But if you take a microcosm of it, conceptually, the same thing can happen. We're not, and I want to make sure I'm not misunderstood, we're not talking about becoming a Disney World by any stretch. But conceptually, you can do things that cause growth to occur, not to those levels, but we can take advantage of our assets to increase the tourism for all these natural resources, and then to phase in, hopefully, a larger development that can occur in phases that enhances the history and other attributes that we have here.
The world is growing smaller and smaller. You talk about being international. Thank goodness the field of communications is such that we can spread the word 1,000 times easier than we could in the 1950s or 60s or 70s. We had an economic downturn that stabbed us in the back and all other sides of our body for a while, and there were, we've sat around tables with this camera and Calvin and Hometown Cable talking with people with some of those wonderful dreams, 10 years ago, 12, 13 years ago. And some of the dreams were dashed, not for want of hard work, but because the time wasn't right.
Right.
But as we, the four of us and Calvin, sit around this table, I can feel that the time is right, can't you? And if we don't take advantage of it now, we're going to miss a fabulous, maybe once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
The way that all these anniversaries line up. I mean, if we
Absolutely.
don't take advantage of the opportunity, we're going to have to wait another 50 or 100
Right,
years before it comes around again.
We got to get some of the history books rewritten. We've talked about that in the Battle of Plattsburgh, and in some measure have been instrumental in helping to rewrite the history books as to, where the battle
Right.
occurred and where the ships went down and so on. But to get that national, international interest, we did it with our little airport, Shelley.
Right. And the airport, and it's funny, but both of what you just said are huge components of what we're doing. The War of 1812 bicentennial, obviously we're launching that. We're working, John and I are both on a committee, the Bicentennial Council. And that is a wonderful, it's just got tremendous synergy with what we're trying to do and elevate the history locally. So that is going to bring attention to our cause. And again, it's just a wonderful marriage. So that's going to be a key component of this. The other part is the airport. The planes fly both ways. So we're looking
Sure
at
do.
the other end to look at the different target markets, see where the opportunity lies without much cost invested. Bringing cyclists here, bringing paddlers here, and then as we start to develop the tours or the historical aspects of things, start going after the history buffs and bringing them here as well. So again, there's huge opportunity that didn't exist a few years ago.
But I think the history is the focal point. When you mentioned the phrase historic or historical corridor, wow. I mean, many things that we haven't even discussed here involved in the formation of our nation and even before had their genesis right in, within 25 miles of where we're sitting right here at this table.
The first and last battles between English-speaking nations occurred in our backyard.
There you go.
And Winston Churchill, we talk a lot about the Battle of Plattsburgh, but Winston Churchill said of the Battle of Alcoa that the Battle of Alcoa was perhaps the most important naval battle in the history of the United States. So we're fortunate to have two very historic battles that occurred on our lake, and it's time for us to take our rightful place in history and have this community come together. And I just keep emphasizing the reason it's going to be different this time and the reason that it can occur is because we will make sure that it's a community-based event to recreate this interpretive center and tie into all the other museums to make that experience larger and better to attract people, because it's a competitive world, as you know.
Right.
And we're going to have a product that's going to draw people here.
And to talk about larger and better and to push the envelope a little more, if you take our story back to Champlain in 1609, we can celebrate 200 years of war followed by 200 years of peace.
Right.
Yeah. And this may not even be the forum for me to express this view, but Calvin and I spent a lot of time trying to promote the quadricentennial and local events, and New York State events. And when it was all finished, I felt good about it, but not as good as I wanted to when I first thought about the quadricentennial. So everything in its own time. Marketing is absolutely essential. We're going to get your halo adjusted and launch out. How big is this committee now?
If you touch her more than twice, you'll be on a committee. Be careful.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Super glue?
Yeah.
How big is the committee, Shelley?
Well, the Strategic Tourism Planning Committee, which is really the larger committee, there are 12 individuals on it. And the Destination Master Plan, which is a subcommittee, is growing. We've got at least 14. We started with the 12 core members, and then we've added a few. And that I see that just swelling. So we're going to get a lot of people involved, and that we have to.
Do you both feel as though the time is right for this?
Absolutely.
I mean, you can be ahead of your time. That's what visionaries do. They forecast things, predict things, and dream about things that aren't going to happen within their lifetimes.
Yeah.
But somebody's got to get the ball rolling. And the ball is rolled into our court, if you want to use that phrase.
And what's interesting, the timing, the same day we rolled out the Destination Master Plan, they announced the Laurentian project. The funding had come through, and that's a big
Not
piece
bad
of
company,
this.
huh?
That's a big piece of this is, when you start recruiting people across the country, they have expectations. Many of them are going to be coming from metropolitan areas. They're going to be looking for certain outdoor activities and cultural experiences, and we need to make sure we're providing those. We need to make relocation easier. So.
There are times in our history, at least in my history of the last 50 years in this area, where we had such an opportunity, but we didn't have all the ingredients.
Right.
In the early 1960s, when General Dynamics Astronautics came to this area to build these Atlas missile sites, it revolutionized everything, the housing market. You were just such a small child. But it revolutionized, rents, gas prices, home prices, everything else, but we weren't ready to tell the history story. We weren't ready to market this area because that was taken care of itself with the advent of Plattsburgh Air Force Base. All that turned around a little bit. Now we have another opportunity.
Right.
Well, I think one of the things that's, I don't want to ever be negative, but one of the things is that we're talking about doing planning we've never done before. And we're talking about being proactive to an extent that we've never done before. And we're talking about assembling a large enough support for it that it will happen this time. You know, exactly how big it occurs will be another story, but it will happen this time.
The people will tell the story. We'll just,
And there's room for everybody to be involved
Well,
and
that's-
everybody to tell their
that's
story.
essential.
And it just makes it a richer fabric if they do that.
And that's what's so interesting. You know, there's so many different groups with, you know, some are telling the same story, but with different, you know, focusing on whether it's the lifestyles or the military history, some, you know, the Underground Railroad. There's so many different pieces to our culture, and there's room for all of that in here. And, you know, we're not taking anything from anyone. We're trying to enrich the entire experience. And that's a key component.
You know, it just dawns on me when we're talking about growth and making sure the time and place are right and the people get involved. The history of the chamber itself,
Yeah.
long before you were ever dreamed of. You know, we had little organizations called the Downtown Merchants. We had, every area had its chamber. Many areas our size still have chambers, about 1/10 the size and impact of this chamber. And it wasn't without a great deal of effort that this chamber grew and grew and grew until it
Still
became
growing.
the Plattsburgh and North Country Chamber of Commerce. I don't know what we're going to call it next time.
Actually, we've dropped the Plattsburgh. It's now North Country Chamber of
North Country
Commerce.
Chamber of
Yeah.
Commerce. Goodbye, Plattsburgh.
Yeah. I just think that you know, it shows the vision as we're looking,
Sure.
you know, the bigger picture. But yeah, we're going to hit our 100th anniversary next year.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
Just fantastic. I know these two guys have, I won't say they have bigger eggs to crack, but you know, they're vital parts of the community, as all these community members are. So we're gonna let them go. John, any last words before you leave us about what you'd like to see happen with this?
What I'd like to see is anybody who has an interest in promoting this area and their community and has time or a story to tell to please get involved.
Yeah.
You know, a message.
We're only going to be successful based on a broad base of support.
Early on, Terry, I mentioned the schools. I have a lot of friends who are teachers, educators, principals, superintendents in this area. Among all the other ingredients that make us as good as we are, our school systems are part of that framework that holds the fabric together. And I'm sure you agree that we have to get to every kindergarten, second, third, fourth grade teacher in this area, every school principal, you know, to come up with their own little piece of this vision, right?
Gordy, I'll happily agree with that because, as you know, my wife is a former teacher, and I would.
You'd have to agree.
But I do agree anyway. That, you know, getting the starting right from our children and going all the way through our community, like John said, it's going to be important to get that broad-based community support and everybody really wanting to help out in some way.
Now, we're recording this in the throes of cold weather in the North Country, where 20 degrees below zero are forecast for a couple of days from now. But the weather does get better. And one of the great things we promote about the North Country, if you don't like the weather, hang around 5 minutes and it'll get better. But we do have so many wonderful winter sports, Calvin, and I just interviewed a young man who was a national snowshoe champion, leaving the area, but he's been a music teacher at Northeast Clinton. But that just proves that there's so many things at all seasons of the year that set us apart from the rest of this great nation and other countries too. So we do have a lot to crow about.
Find another area that's more
You can't,
physically
more
attractive.
diverse in every way. We got so much going for it, and you've been careful to pick some pretty cool people for this committee. And I've always said before, you know, you talk about brainstorming. We've got the brains to do some real serious storming. Now that you've laid the groundwork, I can't wait to see what's going to happen by summertime. How often does this committee meet?
Hourly.
Touch her again and you'll see.
Email and IM and texting and
The,
telephone calls and.
We have, and we can talk more about it, but the Strategic Tourism Planning Committee started meeting monthly, and then with the addition of the Destination Master Plan, we started meeting twice a month, and now in December, I mean, we were meeting several times a day. So I gave them a month off, and now we're rolling up our sleeves, and we have a huge flow chart here about, you know, our upcoming meetings, and it's an impressive, and I think it really shows the dedication of, you know, the committee. And
I'm a
it's
part-time staff of one, so it's an interesting balance to try to
Yeah.
maintain.
But
So-
you know what? It's something that I can reiterate about this ownership. I want all of our viewers to know now, to show you how far we've come in field of communications. Calvin's been doing this since the early '80s with ball games and school events and so on, and we've graduated into several kinds of very important programs like this one that are viewed not only on the North Country's cable systems, but on the internet in two places, at Plattsburgh.com and HometownCableNetwork.com, so that people in Oshkosh, we use them as an example just because I love to say the name, can view this program, and our friends at Disney World can look at this program and say, hey, what have they got in northern New York that we don't have?
Right.
And the one big difference between Disney World and Terry's example and what we hope to achieve here, Disney World was just created from scratch.
Right.
There was nothing there to start with. We have a very rich product, and we're just going to improve it.
All we got to do is throw it all in the soup and get people to see what that soup is. But my point in addition to that is to let our viewers know that this is theirs.
Absolutely.
This is not just some nebulous committee that sits on an ivory tower somewhere hundreds of miles away who makes decisions that affects their lives. But we appreciate their input as well. And at some point in time, we'll find a way to entertain their input.
Yes, absolutely. We can give them either an email or a phone number to
Yeah.
call.
And everybody out there who says there's nothing to do here, this is your
Can
opportunity.
you believe that kills me, doesn't it,
Yeah.
you, John? I'll say sit down a minute.
Yeah.
How long have you got?
Yeah.
But this is also their opportunity to correct that.
Yes.
Right.
For whatever is missing in the community they want to have here,
Right.
then come forward and help.
Perspective is one of my favorite words. And people have different perspectives. That's why we have so many different people on this committee who come at it with a different point of view. But historical perspective to me is absolutely essential. And you know that if you don't understand your history or care about your history, that you cannot have a vision for the future.
Right.
And it behooves everybody watching this program to talk about it at the supper table tonight. Ask your kids what they know about this committee, and they'll say nothing yet. Sit down for a minute and listen to this program.
Right.
You know, because we all need little kids to be reenactors too, you know?
Yep.
Right? Gentlemen, I thank you so much for being here. We'll no doubt have another chapter of this wonderful program as it unfolds.
If we don't, I'll be disappointed.
Yeah, I will be too. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Gordy.
Thanks, Gordy. Thank you, Calvin.
Thanks.
We've got a captive audience now. Michelle Powers at the Chamber of Commerce here for the North Country. Delightful conversation so far. We have so far to go. What tell me a little bit about the idea of the Adirondack coast.
My first year here really was 5 years ago, and I was writing my very first marketing plan, and I was a newcomer to the area, and I read through the marketing plan, and I talked about Clinton County, the Champlain Valley, the North Country, the Plattsburgh area, and I realized we have an identity crisis.
Absolutely.
If you're marketing, people need to know what you're marketing, and when we use it interchangeably, it's very confusing to outsiders. So I had done some reading, and I had heard the term Adirondack Coast, which really described where Lake Champlain meets the Adirondacks, and I loved it. The Adirondack brand, it's known, it's familiar, and it's visual. And when you hear the word coast, I mean, obviously that pops up images in your mind as well. And it had been used by other organizations, so I stole it. I'm not gonna take claim for this. Essex County had been using it. I did call them and said, would you mind if we started using this? And it has such a great reaction, and I think my job will be done when people start saying that they live on the Adirondack coast. That'll make me happy.
It'll take a while.
It's going to take a while, and the good thing is it's a relatively new term, which gives us a lot of opportunity. So when you go out into the market with it, and when we start marketing throughout the country and the world, it's a fresh term. But again, it still has that strong Adirondack identity.
We would invite our viewers to throw it around a little bit.
Absolutely.
It's like getting the attention of the mule by hitting them in the head with a 2x4. You have to somehow startle people into the fact that it behooves them
Right.
to jump on this bandwagon, which you have rolling through here
Yep.
right now.
Yep, the Adirondack coast.
So, and I love the publicity. I love all the marketing. You worked with an agency on that, didn't you?
Actually, we don't.
Oh, you didn't.
We
You did
don't.
it here.
We do everything in-house. We work with designers. We have some media agencies that we do use to help us create the materials, but all the copywriting and the creative is really done in-house.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's
Yeah.
a nice feather.
Well, we have a big staff of 2, so we've got, it keeps us busy.
All right, let's talk about the present status
Yep.
of your plan. What have you got going?
Well, one of the things that, with the Destination Master Plan, we really started focusing on some of our core competencies. What are our strengths? And it was interesting how things, obviously the history came up, and we are going to really start capitalizing on that to create something that is authentic and immersive. And I think those are really 2 key words that we need to include when we talk about it. But then there's so much more, and to include the entire county. Agritourism is very popular right now, and we have, an emerging wine trail. So a lot of people may not even know that.
Amen to that.
I know,
Yes.
it's fantastic.
I
So
love it.
when, the cold weather grapes, and, we've got honey wines and apple wines and things made, right down the road from here, and it's fantastic. So we have a huge opportunity with agritourism. But even beyond, just the wineries, we have obviously all the maple producers, the dairy farmers, the cheese
apple
makers,
growers.
the orchards. So we've got a tremendous opportunity here to reach out to people outside of the area and saying, come here and experience this. These things are, they're local. You can only get them here. And we want to also encourage those producers to include the Adirondack Coast brand, in that. So we have reached out. We've had a few meetings with some of the some in the agritourism and the agriculture industry here, and it's been very, very positive, and we're really looking forward to growing that, and having farm tours and hands-on dairy tours and things like that. So I think people are looking for that type of experience.
This kind of thing has been done on a much, much smaller scale for many years. But if you can create a program
Right.
that appeals to all of these interests in the one package.
Exactly.
When you're talking about a destination, you have little kids who are going to have a totally different
Right.
interest in an area than their grandparents, for
Right.
example.
And it gives more, it gives us more dimension as a destination. When someone comes here, maybe they're coming for cycling or paddling. While they're here, they can also go and visit the orchards or go to, a history museum that maybe they hadn't put on their itinerary. So, we need for them to want to really experience the area more, give them more to do, but also they'll need to come back because there's going to be so much to do, and that's the goal is for those repeat visitors. So that's another big piece of this. Beyond the agritourism, we're also looking at obviously we've got a huge opportunity with the fishing. We've introduced
Wow, something we haven't even
right
mentioned.
fishing.
Let's get into this hook, line, and sinker.
Oh dear. Obviously the pro fishing tournaments over the last decade, They have just grown.
Unbelievable.
We're not even really, marketing to the tour promoters anymore. They know we're here. They're coming. They have a full field every time they come. But what that does is it lets us go out and market to the recreational fishermen who have now heard of Lake Champlain in the area. But it's not even Lake Champlain. We have so many other lakes in this region.
Goodness, rivers and lakes and streams and
Exactly. It's incredible. So we are trying to get them to come and experience that. There's been some great fishing opportunities opened up with the development of the Saranac River Trail. Some honey holes that I've heard about. I'm not going to tell on the TV.
Oh, yes.
So, that's a huge opportunity. Paddling. We've got flat water and white water here. If you want to be on the lake, the rivers, Lake Champlain or some of the interior lakes. And then we also obviously have, there's skiing. People look at this area and there's whiteface here. But when you look at Clinton County as a home base, you can ski Vermont, you can ski Whiteface. Jay Peak is right around the corner. So that puts us in a different position as well and lets us welcome people here year round. Cycling is another huge opportunity. With Vela Quebec over the summer, we've known for years that this is a great cycling destination. That just put an exclamation point on the end. When Vela Quebec, they described our roads as velvet. And,
don't you love it?
It was fantastic.
That doesn't hurt,
It doesn't hurt, and they're right. We've got low traffic, fantastic roads, and not to mention the scenery. So it's just a great cycling destination. Since Velo Quebec, I know there's places in Rouse's Point that have become hubs that people will come and park their cars and go out for the day.
Yeah.
We see a lot of that in Peru as well. So that's growing, and we are putting a plan to go out and actively market to those niche markets. So
do you think we'll have driving tours and walking tours like many other areas do?
That is one of our goals. We whether it's a history tour or a botany tour, there's so many different things that can be done here.
Oh, sure.
Birding, obviously, even
absolutely.
the Lake Champlain birding trail.
Oh, yes.
So there's so many different opportunities, but focusing on just a few things to start that is key to our success here, because you have dollars. We can't just dilute the entire fund by looking at too much too soon. So we've chosen a few core competencies or core strengths, and we've developed a marketing campaign around those. And I can share those with you, but I think one of the things that we're doing that's going to stand out a little more is when we're promoting fishing with an icon system that we developed. You'll be able to see everything else that there is to do on the area. So even if you're a fisherman, look, they have wineries, they have beaches, they have cycling, and vice versa. On a paddling ad, you would see those same icons.
It opens up a vista in my mind, and Calvin was just mentioning a few while the camera was shut off. Cemeteries.
Yeah.
As morbid as that may sound to some, historic cemeteries are an amazing destination for many people, even people who have only a peripheral interest in history, just because they say, look at that one.
Right.
1811. You gotta be kidding.
The Independent Cemetery in the town of Saranac is fantastic.
Oh, isn't it wonderful?
And it's one of those things that you drive by on Route 3 and you see there's a cemetery. If you come from the other side, the main entrance, you drive in and just the entrance of it is overwhelming. And you're someplace special.
And those people spend a lot of time on it. We've spent their time with our cameras.
Yeah.
We know many people who've worked with that cemetery for generations,
Right.
and that huge monument, Civil War monument, is unique.
It's an incredible place, and those are the types of things that people are looking for guided tours to. So, again, with the history component of our master plan, I'm thinking, if you can have an educated guide taking people, maybe even in costume, to those types of things, those historical treasures really all around the county.
They're all treasures. Calvin and I have talked about this often and done many, many programs on different phases of things that interest people in history, not the least of which you've alluded to, and that is the Underground Railroad.
Yeah.
So many sites that you can,
Right.
you can put dots on a map.
Yep.
We have so many experts in this area.
Right.
The iron mining, Another wonderful, logging, the logging
story,
and
yes.
wood industry, and all this wonderful Saranac River that feeds into
Right.
Lake Champlain, the scene of dozens and dozens of mills and communities. You could have a ghost tour,
There's
a ghost town tour.
You're doing exactly what I want other people to start doing when they start talking about this. And it's like the plan and what is possible. Because again, as a committee, we were thinking big, but we had to focus on a few things. There's so many other opportunities for people out there, and it's our story to tell. And I'm hoping as people get involved, again, down the road, as we get some of the infrastructure put in place and, some of the framework, that people can start branching out a little more and telling more of the story.
Yeah,
It's a unique area.
This area is a collage of so many things.
Right.
Historical. When you talk about people moving here, moving across the border,
Yep.
people come to do genealogies, another big
Yes.
thing. We have some very strong groups who think and study genealogy in this area. And, you talk about the cemeteries. That will bring people as a destination
Right.
from everywhere because their ancestors might have come from Ireland or France or somewhere and landed
Right.
here in the port of Montreal
Yep.
and stayed there for a while and then
Moved out.
made their
Right.
way south. So what do you want to show me here? What do we got here?
These are just a couple of the ads, and again, this is showing some of the icon system. And if you look at the bottom of the ad, it's an ad about fishing, and I love the headline because any fisherman knows you don't tell your secrets. But if we didn't tell you, no one would.
Is that what happened with the honey holes a few minutes ago?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm sworn to secrecy.
Yeah.
But down at the bottom of the ad, you will see our icon system. So even though we're focusing on fishing in the ad, you can see everything else that there is to do
Thank
here.
God for the internet. Huh?
Isn't
What
it
would
great?
we do without it? Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah,
So who produced these things?
these were done by the Visitors Bureau. Again, we hired an outside firm to help us with the actual design of it, but all the
Oh.
copywriting and the concept is done
They're great.
in-house.
Is this a classic picture
Isn't that wonderful?
of the Valcourt Lighthouse?
Yep. And that is Jody Parks, our executive vice president in front.
Why wouldn't I guess that? She'd have to be in the
She
front.
is, featured in a lot of our models. But I'll show you. If you look at that ad, and then I've got, these are some the icons that we're featuring. And,
Wow.
These are big. We use these for one of our events. But this would be one of the icons. But you can see that is also Jody in front.
I think she ought to get a special talent fee for that,
Yeah.
don't you?
So, but again, what these do is they're just very, icons are small little images that just immediately evoke a big idea. And
So how do they end up at this size?
yeah, but again, we're going to put them everywhere. So if we go to a trade show that is focusing on, say it's fishing, we're going to be able to showcase everything else that there is to do here. So yes, we'll be talking about fishing, but in an instant they'll be able to see we have wineries, we have history, we have beaches, we have sailing. So it's just a simple concept that we've really taken and run with, and it's
Absolutely
exciting.
important because,
Yeah.
to extend a theory of mine, everything is connected.
Yes.
And in this case, everything will be connected.
Yes.
So that when you get on a site, nobody's ever content to stay there. That's why they open their laptop in the morning and they want
Where
to
else
see
can
all
we
the
go?
news they can see. They want to find the temperature in Saranac Lake. They want to find what's going on in Montreal or New York City. And if they can be mobile from that particular
Right.
site, they can learn all they need to learn.
Exactly.
I love it. Next.
Yeah, thanks. I think those are the ones I gave you. That we're done with those.
Okay, and what's this?
This is this is something I created for our destination master
Just
plan.
to know we have some serious logistics going
This
on
is a
here.
lot of logistics, and again, it shows you the commitment of our team. The upper tiers are really the Visitors Bureau and the Chamber of Commerce, and the committee itself, and then we start getting into smaller and smaller committees with more focused tasks, and that's, developing of the interpretive center to creating reenactment boot camps. There's so many different things that we need to check off our list, and this is going to help us really serve as a roadmap to get there.
How new is all of this? I know you had a news conference, which
Yep.
we didn't attend. That would have been, we're doing this after mid-January.
Yeah, yeah.
When did you do the news conference?
That was December 10th. So, it's been about a month that we rolled it out, but we've been working on it as a committee for about a year. We started talking about the necessity of having a plan like this, and, having the view from an outsider, someone visiting the area and really seeing what our assets were and were, and because sometimes we don't want to hear it. And it was a fantastic process. And he came up with some new things that we haven't thought of, and a lot we just needed, I think, just a little pushing to say, yes, you can do this. And we worked with a firm out of Missouri who's really worked all over the world on engineering tourism. And so it's been a great relationship. And again, the steering committee, the Strategic Tourism Planning Committee, has been the visionaries behind this. And so we rolled out the major ideas in December, but not without a lot of input from other organizations. We went to a lot of the museums, the municipalities, different economic development organizations. So it's been a very inclusive process, but we're not done yet. We're still now rolling it out to other civic
Not done
organizations.
yet.
I know.
You've just opened the first page of the book.
Exactly. We've got a long, long road ahead of us, but I think, again, if you mentioned the committee a few times about how strong it is and how dedicated they are.
Is there a more proactive group
That's fantastic.
anywhere on the face of the earth?
No, and I think that's something, you say about the North Country and that I've discovered since I've been here is people, they get it done. They see a need and they do it, and that's a really
This
It's
has been my
fantastic.
hue and cry for ever and ever. Whenever there's a need for something, but you have to explain it to people.
right. Yep.
You have to get their attention, say, here's what we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
But, they've referred to this part of the North Country years ago as a sleeping giant. Because, people become apathetic sometimes, and they need a gadfly like Shelley to inspire them. To get them, to prick them into action,
Right.
to think about it. But besides all the resources we've mentioned, we have that intellectual resource up here, as is obvious by the people you've chosen on this committee and these subcommittees. And, our education system is a
Right.
great attraction, not only for people settling here,
Right.
but for doctors to come into the area,
Exactly.
for businesses.
And that's some of this as well as, we've talked a little bit with the hospital and some of the larger businesses who are out there recruiting people. With having some of these things in place,
Absolutely.
it makes the conversation easier. It makes this area a lot more attractive. People are here for a reason. I came up, I stayed because I love the outdoors.
Yeah.
And where else would you want to be? So, it's just for me, sometimes I'm scratching my head like, well, why wouldn't they want to come here? But, again, just having some more formalized activities and things that people can immerse themselves in, that's going to make it more attractive as a community, as a destination, and it's a win-win. So,
We are fortunate in many respects, and I mention this and hear this from people I interview for other publications all the time. We are resistant to change. In some ways it's beneficial, in some ways it's not. The recent economic downturn found us pretty resistant to it, and we didn't respond to it for a long time. And we didn't fall as far into the deep and bottomless pit as many other areas did. And that's something, that insulation that we have up here is something that we can count toward our credit, I think. And so as we're doing this in January of 2011, we're rebounding in a big way, in
Right.
many big ways. And I can see confidence. Every time I stop in a store, talk to friends of mine, people are feeling better about themselves, the job situation, the housing market, banking, and so on in this area. But that doesn't come without a lot of very special effort, and I think yours is one
Oh,
that
thank you.
will put the icing on the cake You know, I can't say often enough that this is for me a dream come true, because it's something I've thought about.
Right.
Calvin and I have both thought about, because we love this area.
Right.
And it adds a whole new definition to that thing called the quality of life that we expounded upon when we tried to save the airbase a couple of times.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's, there's a couple different pieces of that. One is when people, I want people to learn about the plan, and figure out where their piece is. And if nothing else, keep it in their back pocket, so to speak. So as they're thinking about business opportunities and, well, now that this is in place and they're moving forward and they gain confidence in it, maybe it'll give them more confidence, I guess, to make harder decisions, whether it's open a new business or expand or hire that extra employee or something. So I think as we grow as a community, this is going to be a huge component of this. And again, we've got a lot of work to do, but I think we also have to win back some of the people who've been thinking about this for a long time, and if they were put against some walls. They had big plans and they were crushed. And so we need to gain their confidence and saying, you know what, we've got the business community behind this now. It's time. And as you said, we're coming out of this economic down, spiral and downturn, and the timing couldn't be better. So.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
When it's time, it's time.
It's time.
And then, once things get rolling, even more firmly than they are now, and people can see that there's, we're putting clay on this framework,
Yep.
and we're going to have a beautiful product when we're finished.
Yep.
You and Calvin and myself and the rest of us have to be tasked with trying to sustain that enthusiasm, so that you'll have to have a way
Right.
for our viewers to find out what your progress is
Right.
on a regular basis. How will they be able to do that?
That was written into our plan.
I love it.
One of the things we have to do is, again, making the process very transparent. And it is. People can visit, it's clintondestinationplan.com. And
That's easy.
we've got the, the assessment, our goals, the vision, everything is up there. Our actions will be up there. We're going to post progress reports. I'm thinking quarterly at this point.
Great.
So we've already, we've rolled this out a month ago. We've already checked a
Gotta
few
have a
things.
place for breaking news.
Absolutely, and we've already checked a few things off. We'll be doing, press releases and regular updates. We'll be contacting you regularly because, again, I think it's very important for people to know the progress. We are progressing.
Absolutely.
We're building momentum. And something that started with a group of 15 people has grown to, a group of 100, and what's happening with that. And it's just really, really exciting. And now I'll go to a meeting and it will be completely unrelated to the destination master plan, and somebody will slip me their card and say, I want to be involved in the storytelling. And it's happening all the time. So that momentum, it's building already.
Every major business, every educational institution on every level, people from every walk of life can make a contribution. The more, the merrier.
Absolutely.
Who knows, what's going to boil out of this pot along the way. And
Right.
as you said before, you're just now getting organized.
Yep.
But if we can bottle up the enthusiasm in this room and in that committee and expend it
Right.
in little doses
Yep.
along the way, I think
Yep.
we'll have accomplished something.
It's happening, and we've made contact with so many great organizations who are already doing similar things. The Saranac River Trail, there's so much continuity between the two groups. We're not working, we're working together. We're starting to attend their meetings. They've actually initiated a lot of meetings for us. You need to come talk to this group and this group. So there's just so many natural synergies. The healthy communities that Clinton County is doing, to try to make this a more active, healthy place, and it fits right in. So there's a lot of people already doing things that this plan encompasses.
We haven't even talked about the cultural aspect of the North Country. We have so many things culturally
Right.
up here to offer that we need to be crowing about those as well.
Absolutely, and I think, again, and as we mentioned with Laurentian coming here, people will be looking for those things. So I think you'll even see more growth in that in that realm as well.
Well, talk a little bit, because there are people who are watching this program for the very first time. Saying,
I don't believe that.
Say, well, every now and again somebody will stumble on a
Okay.
website.
Okay.
You know, they'll put Plattsburgh on their Google search engine, and they'll come up with Plattsburgh.com, and
Yep.
they'll find how many now, Calvin? 5,000? 6,000 different events that Calvin has taped
Wow.
over the years.
Wow.
He's taped many more than that, but that's how
Okay.
many are on the internet.
Right, okay.
And so there's enough to satisfy any and all interest there, believe
Yep.
me. And so they'll discover us for the first time and say, hey, I like what they're talking about.
Right.
It'll give them another vision for their little
Right.
area of the world, wherever it might be. So it's important for us, you know,
Absolutely.
not to hide our light under a bushel, as used to
Exactly.
be the biblical
Yep.
phrase, but it's to
Yep.
get out there and scream it to the mountaintops.
Right. And there's, when you talk about the cultural aspects and, from the tourism aspect, you always try to, what makes you unique. And even just, some of the Adirondack crafters that we have.
Oh, my
and
goodness.
It's incredible.
Think about
it. Right. And the furniture and those are products that people can also, purchase here, take home and have that connectivity to this region forever. And we want to really take advantage
You
of that.
mentioned, I'm so glad to hear about the word Adirondack used in what we
Yeah.
have here, because it does have a magical connotation
Absolutely.
everywhere. I mean, this started generations ago in Japan, where people from Japan wanted to put Adirondack on things that they made in Japan. But it's true, and they love
Right.
to come over here in delegations because of. You talked, we mentioned the word microcosm before, but we have so much good stuff jammed
Yes.
into this
Yes.
region,
Yep.
this general region, that there is something for everybody.
Right. And that's something too we want to embrace, when we look at ourselves as a destination, we are adjacent to the Adirondack Park, and we're not going to turn our back on that. We want to embrace that. And
Oh,
again,
right.
having people use us as a home base, and then or a base camp, and being able to circulate throughout the Adirondacks. The airport has now become a gateway for the Adirondacks. People can fly here for the first time, and that's incredible. We've had a lot of people getting on planes to go to Ironman now, or come up for some of the, the World Cups and
Sports venues, of course,
absolutely.
big time.
It's a huge thing, and you mentioned the closing of the base, but in retrospect, it may have been a great thing for this community.
Well, look at the door that it opened.
Exactly.
I mean, we grieved for a while.
Right.
As I've told many people, we grieved for a while, and then we got to work.
Exactly. And look what's happened.
And look, it's the best recovery story in the history of
Yeah.
our nation. How many bases have closed
Right.
where they're now slums?
Right.
And this area got to work, and that speaks very well
Yeah.
for not only people like you and Gary and the chamber and everybody else, but for the local businessmen who decided to grab their pants and pull them up and pull the bootstraps up
Yep.
and say, let's wade through this
Right.
smelly stuff and get going. And look at what we've,
Right.
and that's only 15 years ago when you
Yeah.
stop to think about
Right.
it.
And if you look at the growth of the airport since it's opened, it opened
Well,
in
it's only-
2007 without a plane.
It's
and
not
we-
even 3 years yet,
and
kids.
we've outgrown it. So
Yeah.
they're expecting over 150,000 people to pass through this year.
And that's a book that's only in the first or second chapter.
Yeah,
And, there'll be expansion.
absolutely.
There's
Yes.
bound to be expansion. The plans are already in
Yes.
the works, and we
Yeah.
just can't wait to watch it happen
I
and
know.
hope that Hometown Cable can be a part of it. What have you got here?
This is something we have. John Kruger is also on the Bicentennial Committee. We were approached really almost a year ago by the Battle of Plattsburgh Commemoration Committee. The event committee came to us and said the Bicentennial is coming and we need help. So we formed the War of 1812 Bicentennial Council to really embrace the event. It was interesting when we first sat down as a committee, and it's a small committee, but to discover, what is this going to be? And we were trying to conceptualize. And at the same time as when we introduced the concept of the Destination Master Plan, and how they've converged has really been remarkable. one of our initial goals was to make the Battle of Plattsburgh event really the signature historical event in the Northeast. That was the goal. Since then, it's changed, and we want to make it really a year-round experience for people through the Destination Master Plan. So you don't have to come here in September to experience the reenactments and the storytelling and the historical lectures. You would be able to come to the Adirondack Coast any time of year and experience that and immerse yourselves in it. And that's really our ultimate goal. And again, the timing of this and the master plan, it's perfect.
We have got to tip our collective hat to those people who are reenactors and who
Absolutely.
promote reenactments. The first reenactments I ever saw were at Gettysburg.
Okay.
And because that's a focal point of the Civil War in our
Right.
nation's history. And when it started here, I was so thrilled because my wife and family, those are inexpensive vacations when you can go to places and see that community
Yep.
people dress up all the time or some of the time. And it just brings that whole thing right into
Yep.
focus for the little kids and the older kids. And these reenactors, you talked about various times of the year, we've been out there
Yeah.
with our cameras and
Freezing.
microphones when I don't know how many layers they had on, but they
Yeah.
weren't nearly as blue as we were in terms of the color of their skin. And so they're doing that. They're doing reenacting at more different times
Right.
now.
They are so passionate.
Wonderful.
It's incredible. I have to giggle, and I've actually been traveling more with reenactors. It seems at every press conference I have them standing behind me, which is wonderful. And again, they're so dedicated to making this happen. They're very excited about the Destination Master Plan. You are seeing a lot more reenactments, more times throughout the year. And we want to embrace that. One of the things we've talked about doing is the reenactment boot camps. So instead
Oh,
of just
yeah.
having a spectator watch the reenactments, they would actually be able to go to a camp for a week or a few days, learn how to cook over an open campfire, sew a bag that they're going to carry their ammunition in, and learn to fire a musket, and pay for the privilege. So one of my goals, and I talked to a reenactor, Craig Russell, who's very involved in the Battle of Plattsburgh.
What a guy.
I love Craig.
Isn't he great?
Craig said, I said, Craig, if we were able to turn your reenacting into a career and you're actually going to be able to get a paycheck, what would you do? And his answer was, I'd have to find another hobby. So, they're just so passionate
Yeah.
about it, and it's great, and they
They
spend
all are.
so
They're
much
wonderful,
time
and
doing
his
it.
wife and
Yeah.
people's wives and kids, and
Right. So,
it's so great to see that happen.
Yeah.
We can't say enough for the reenactors because they've added a cloak on this statue of history in the North Country that's we hope never comes off.
I want to see it expanded. There's so many wonderful things that adds to the community. It adds to the flavor. It adds to the experience of someone visiting, and we need to leverage that.
Shelley, something we haven't talked about yet is we've talked about the enthusiasm, the intelligence, the getting the minds together and coming up with a master plan. But who's going to pay for
I
everything?
knew that was going to be your next question. Again, we are still in the very early throes of this. We have a lot of thinking to do, a lot of brainstorming, and that's a huge question. So, there's been some initial talks about creating nonprofits and things like that, but I think we need to sit down and really do some feasibility studies, figure out the scope of the projects and what is affordable. Many of the things that we're talking about can be done very, very cheaply.
Oh, of course, with
and-
volunteer.
And quickly.
Yeah.
Obviously, the interpretive center is something. It's very big picture. It's a big ticket item, and it's much longer down the road.
Yeah.
But by putting the other things in place, like expanding the reenactments, and even the agritourism, and a lot of it is just changing the way we think and market. So there's a lot of things that we can be put in place very inexpensively. And those are the kind of things we want to, tick off our list quickly to build that confidence to make the next decisions and steps that are going to be a little more expensive, to be able to do that with more confidence.
And there are a lot of individual businesses and organizations that will want to get on board once
Absolutely.
they realize what you're trying to do.
Absolutely.
In the past, we, and I say collectively, we have tried to promote historical bus tours through this area.
Yep.
Some have been successful, some not so much. But the bus tours, getting organizations involved in bus tours and having, you get on aboard a bus somewhere and you take a tour to Plattsburgh and they'll give you a 1 day, 2 day, 3 day,
Yep.
4 day tour. Why not?
We have a group marketing specialist, Christy Kennedy, and that is her full-time job, is to welcome groups to the area, whether it's a historical group looking to, travel the area and look at the sites, or, it's a student group coming and they don't want to do anything educational, they just want to do fun things, which is actually, it's hard to do because those are their specific requirements. There will be no learning on this trip. So we have looked at the historical aspect. We're actually working right now with other regions throughout New York State that also have sites from the from the War of 1812. So our focus is obviously on the Battle of Plattsburgh, but actually having a War of 1812 tour for bus groups. We need to grow a little bit as a destination to be able to offer more. Some of our organizations right now can't house a full bus load, and that's an issue. So we need to be very realistic up front about what can and can't be done, but try to develop the product in a way that's very forward thinking, so down the road that can be very easily accomplished. So we do have, Christy is constantly working with buses and motor coaches, trying to get them here and to do different things. The focus has never fully been history, but it's always a component of it. So again, as we grow and this plan really starts to flesh out, I think that can be the focus. And after a while, it starts to market itself as once people learn the product and how immersive it is and what they're going to be able to do with their group, while it's here, it's an easy sale on their end. They're going to come without even a phone call from us. So, and that's the long-term goal.
It's great because, we've associated ourselves with Canada and Montreal for all the obvious reasons,
Right.
and some that aren't quite so obvious for a long time. And they love to have us visit them, and
Yes.
we love
Yes.
to have them visit us. As we're doing this in January 2011, our currency is just about even
Yes,
across the
which is
board.
fantastic.
Very interesting. And
Yep.
Calvin and I have lived long enough to see some amazing fluctuations
Right.
in that currency.
Yeah.
It's getting more difficult for some people to travel to Europe because of economic reasons and various political reasons. There are lots and lots of people who live in New York State alone that we would love have
Yep.
to come up here, who are just a drive away.
Yep.
As I said
Right.
at the outset of this program, Shelley, the world is smaller and smaller.
Absolutely.
And communications don't just include the internet and telephones and cell phones and text messages,
Right.
but getting in a car and be able to go somewhere in 5 or 6 hours, because we still have a little stigma attached to what this area is all about. For the metropolitan area, it gets to
Right.
be a source of comedy routines and humor. Upstate
Right.
New York is the Catskills. When I go traveling to other countries, I say we live in upstate New York, and they say, "Oh, you're from Buffalo."
Yeah, that's
And I love Buffalo.
Yep.
I like Niagara Falls. I like
Right.
Rochester. But give me a break.
Yeah, that's not upstate to me. Upstate is,
So we have
it's
to
Western.
you
Right.
because that's your job, and me because
Yep.
it's a peripheral goal of mine is to promote this area. I have to say how long
Right.
have you got? I want to talk a little bit about this little dot up
Right.
here in the
Right.
far northeastern corner of New York State.
Yep. That's one of the biggest challenges, especially as a marketer with a limited staff and budget, is who do you market? Who do you try to lure here? And, our focus, since I've been on board, has been the Canadians. One, because obviously just the proximity and the strength of the dollar. For the last few years has just been exceptional. So we've really been lucky. And we've traditionally been a drive-in market because we haven't had an airport. So now that, we're never going to turn our backs on Canada, obviously when people climb on a plane and fly somewhere, they tend to stay longer and spend more money. So we're going to start looking at the other ends of those plains and the markets and that really line up with us in terms of interests, you know, the paddlers, the cyclists, the fishermen, and bring them here. And then eventually the history buffs.
I love
So,
it.
okay.
We're going to pause for just a moment. Once again, for people who may have just tuned us in, where have you been? We've covered a lot of ground with this program and plan to cover a little more. We're at the North Country Chamber of Commerce talking with Michelle Powers, Shelley, who's working so much to promote this Adirondack coast. So once again, what's the name of this master committee?
We have the Strategic Tourism Planning Committee.
All right.
And we have on it Vicki DeMarce-Giroux from La Quinta, and she's also the Visitors Bureau Chair. She's on the Chamber's board, so she serves on a lot of different committees with us, and she's been fantastic.
Isn't that amazing how people,
I know.
yeah, some of us say we don't have time. Shame on us.
She doesn't know because
Yeah.
we absorb most of it. Diane Akey, who is with the Akey family, obviously, but the Hampton Inn, and now they're opening Pizzerina Uno. And actually, they just call it Uno now. And as well as Mike Rotel. Tim Brissett from Ausable Chasm. Steve Carpenter from Econo Lodge and Liquor and Wine Warehouse. He's been on the committee since we've started. Chris Dews from Lakeside Coffee. And she's great. She's a northern representative from Rouse's Point.
I have to pause for a moment
Yeah.
because I just met her, maybe a month ago to write an article about her for the Strictly Business magazine. What a charming
Isn't she
young
great?
woman who's
With a great
married
business.
to an oncologist, Jan Deus,
Yep.
at the Cancer Center.
Yep.
And just to say, okay, I'm going to settle on Lake Street in Rouse's Point
Yeah.
and turn this old pharmacy into, I'm going to
It's
show
a
people
fantastic business.
how to
Yeah.
roast coffee, and
Yep.
I love people like that.
Right. Chris is really going to be steering up a lot of we're trying to do in Rouse's Point. One of those things is reopening Fort Montgomery. So
Yeah.
we've got our work cut out for us there, but we've got great hands, and Chris is
Jim
leading the
Millard will
charge there.
camp on your doorstep.
Yes, yes. So he's on our list to call too.
Okay.
Obviously Terry Marin, who was just with us, and John Kruger. He is new to the committee. He's been on really for a month, and we've already put him to
He's a good resource.
He's
and a
fantastic.
good friend.
He's our voice of history. Carol McLean from Irises.
Oh, of course.
She's new to the committee as well.
Look at what they've done with that little place
Exactly. So, and also Paul Dame from
Oh,
Bluff
yes.
Point. And it's interesting when you look at the people who are on the committee, it's such a great representation of those in the tourism industry
Yeah.
and business leaders, and it's great. We also have 3 liaisons from local municipalities. So for the county, Clinton County, Sarah Rowden, she was instrumental in getting the bed tax law passed and has been on the committee and with us ever since.
That's wonderful.
It's fantastic, and she's also obviously very involved with the airport. Rick Perry, who is
We
our...
met him on the way in today.
Yes, Rick is...
We've known him since he was a tiny baby, and that goes back more than 2 years.
Rick,
What a guy.
He is amazing. The amount of time he puts in, he's been instrumental in the development and the growth of the pro fishing tournaments. We still work with him closely on those as the city of Plattsburgh representative. So we're really lucky to have Rick on board. And Bernie Bassett. He represents all of the town supervisors, and he's been a great resource as well. Very, very, very involved, and really helping us push this forward.
I love it. We took a windshield tour with Bernie
Yeah.
Bassett around his town
Yep.
proudly, not too many months ago. And isn't it great to see
The growth is incredible.
The growth and the
Yeah.
enthusiasm
Yes.
in these small communities. So that's your committee.
That is our committee. And, again, we are breaking up into many, many subcommittees to try
Let's
to...
talk about these subcommittees.
Yeah.
And Calvin says we need a timeline. So what's this all about?
How long do you have? Again, and we're looking for people who are interested in getting these things done. So if people at home hear something and it sparks their interest a little bit, give us a call at the chamber. Call me, 563-1000.
Good for you.
And, Michelle Powers, and I'd love to talk to you, put you on a list, invite you to one of the committees, and, this is the time to get involved. We're starting to do the brainstorming, and there might be things like, well, why aren't they doing this? Give me a call for that, too, because I'd love to hear
There's
about
that word
it. And-
perspective again.
Absolutely.
Everybody's got one.
Absolutely. But I think the biggest thing is, and we've grouped this together, but rebuilding the fleets and the interpretive center. And that's that's our lofty goal. The word audacious has been used many times to describe it, but we need to think big picture, long term, and that obviously is a much longer term goal. So to give you a timeline for that, it's hard to say. It could be 10, 15 years out, but we need to start working on that now because it's a huge undertaking, but that would really transform this area.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I know.
What
I
else?
know. The other thing is we're looking at doing is just creating authentic historical experiences. So we're looking for people who might be interested in expanding the reenactments. So for the reenactors out there, how can we do that? Help us get that done. Creating the the reenactor boot camps, like I had discussed. We want to create a storyteller program. So maybe working with one of the local colleges to actually develop a script with the local historians' input, obviously, and then going out to whether it's a local pub, maybe it's Jeffrey's, the British pub, and talking from the perspective of a British soldier, or going to one of the restaurants downtown.
That's very meaningful for people on vacation.
Absolutely.
You go to Ireland, you want to go to a pub, right? You want
Yeah.
to hear some music and stories.
Absolutely.
You go to the Adirondacks, you want to hear some stories?
Right.
Sure. Got
So
it.
yeah, so the storytelling, and they already do that at some of the different museums, but having that more often throughout the year, I
Yes.
think would be great. So we're looking at doing that, and doing some archaeological digs. That is another thing. They're looking at Pike's Cantonment in 2012. Keith Herculow has been instrumental in that, and
He's the man.
He is the man. So we're looking at doing additional digs throughout the community, throughout the county. I think there's some different opportunities in Champlain, some cemeteries and things like that. So, we're really looking at people who are interested in doing that, and or who could help us, find our way there. The other thing is creating a historic corridor in Plattsburgh. And we look at, the Point District, which I also refer to as Dock Street Landing. There's some incredible historic buildings down there.
Oh,
that
architecture. Blow your socks off.
or a cannonball that happens to be buried in the
just
wall.
happens to be,
Yeah.
sure.
So, if there's a way that we can encourage the owners to, a lot of them have been turned into apartments because that's where they're going to get the most income. But as we grow as a destination, maybe there's a different way that they can even generate more money by opening it up to the public, whether it's a bed and breakfast and, guided tours, the ghost tours like you talked about, or things like that. There's so many different things that we can brainstorm about.
Last year I did 10 haunted haunts bus tours
okay.
for the Battle of Plattsburgh Association. 10 hour-and-a-half tours
Wow.
that were, everyone was sold out.
That's fantastic.
And,
So
talking about the
there's a
history
market
of the
for
area.
it. Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
market for it. Reopening the Israel Green Tavern.
Of course.
Of course, they do a recreation for the event, and why not? Open it on the original spot, on the original site. So that is one of our goals as well.
Oh, wow.
Having horse-drawn transportation downtown. What a great thing, for people to experience, and just so they're immersed in that period when they come here.
I know some people might get involved in that.
Yeah, right. Life in the 1800s, and I think that's again a very important about the icing on the cake, and just really giving people that rich experience while they're here. I mentioned reopening Fort Montgomery. Again, a big nut to crack, but it could be doable if the community gets behind it. So Chris Deuce has already been working with a lot of people in Rouse's Point just to start the conversation. To figure out, is it possible? How can we carve out that piece of land and save that piece of our history? So and a lot of these discussions aren't easy. So we've got a lot of work cut out for us. Creating guided tours. We've talked about that. Whether they're costume tours, I think a lot are already in place. And historic cruises. Reclaiming the lake. And Burlington, you can go over and you can
We've
take a
tried
cruise on
so
the
hard
lake.
for so long.
Right, and a lot of that is going to be dependent on the Visitors Bureau to generate more traffic,
Sure.
get more people here. So that's really our charge to make that happen. Looking at the outdoor recreation. we talked about the fishing, the recreational fishing. I had one group who's like, well, why don't we do a fishing festival? And don't stay away from Lake Champlain. Maybe on one of the rivers, have a fly fishing festival or something like that. It's like a fantastic idea and a great opportunity. Open up some new markets. Cycling. We really need to rebuild the infrastructure. Everything from just putting more bike racks out.
Yeah,
When
absolutely.
when someone comes here, we really want to be bike friendly, and there's a few things that need to happen to make that possible. But we're so far, we're so close.
Yeah.
This is a great biking destination, and also with paddling, putting in more kayak decks. I know Rouse's Point is working on one right now, so. And maybe having more shuttles so people can maybe, go launch their kayak in the Saranac and then come down and get taken back to their car or something. Having even something as simple as an insulated lunch. So someone could go to a
Sure.
local restaurant, and the same thing for the cyclist, get a really nice gourmet lunch in in an insulated bag. And that just makes us that much more special as a destination. One of the things we've talked about with both of those is what we're referring to as an adventure car. So when someone comes here and gets a rental car, they're equipped, whether they're going to rent a bicycle or a kayak, they've got the racks or a ski rack during the winter, they're ready to go.
I love it. Adventure car.
An adventure car.
I've never heard that before. I like it.
So hopefully that's something that's good we
Yeah.
can develop in this area, and we're starting to talk with some of the rental car companies to make that happen. Agritourism. Huge. And again, from the farmers, the learning farms. I mean, this also goes to the museums, the Minor Institute. There's so many different, the Cornell Cooperative Extension, there's so many different organizations who we're going to tap on the shoulder to get involved in this project. But really, leveraging the agriculture that's here, in the orchards and in showcasing our area. It's just fantastic. And the maple, and it's great.
Wonderful.
It's wonderful. So if anybody wants to get involved in that, and that's it. There's so many other components of this that will come out and become fuller as we get everything on paper is really where we need to go next.
Well, you have created, I won't say a monster,
It's
but
big.
you've created something that its tentacles will
Yes.
grow and expand, and we hope will crawl into every house,
I hope so.
every school, every business, every historic organization within a far distance
Right.
from here.
And in a very positive way.
And in a totally positive way, and it will be. It is already a dream come true. It's something that I
Dreaming.
personally envisioned for a long time, promoted throughout my entire communications career, and still do with Calvin, and in many other ways. So I commend you, Shelley, for standing, for being such a wonderful cheerleader. Were you a cheerleader in high school?
No, but you used that term to describe me before.
Well, that's what you are. And, if the shoe fits, but you are a cheerleader. That's
Yeah.
what the chamber in general does. That's what its task is. This is a whole new dimension that's been a long time coming.
Yeah.
It's like a wild tiger trying to get out of the cage, and the door is beginning to open.
Yeah, it's time.
So a personal thanks to you,
Oh, thank
to
you.
everybody else who's directly involved already, to the committee members
Yeah.
and the subcommittee members. Your generous contribution of time is so important. But to top off this program, we want to urge people who are watching.
Yeah.
We work them into a fever pitch now.
Yes.
How will they contact you if they want to get aboard?
I think the best thing to call is to call the Chamber of Commerce, 518-563-1000. Ask for Michelle Powers or Christy Kennedy and tell them, I want to get involved with the Destination Master Plan. And we'll put you on a committee and in contact with the right people for your area of interest. So
Everybody would like to think they can make some kind of contribution.
everybody can.
And everybody can. This is your future,
Yeah.
North Country. Get on board right now.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Shelley, for being with us today. Thanks to the gentlemen, Terry Miron and John Kruger, who were
Yes.
with us before. Thanks to all the silent partners who were invisible
Yeah.
in this room today, and thanks to Calvin. Thanks to all our viewers, and we hope you do comment one way or the other. We hope you watch this program, make your monetary contributions to Hometown Cable so that we can continue to sit in these chairs and and cover these various venues. And who knows where we're going to